It happened just 5 minutes ago. An announcement, coming like a bolt from the blue, sent a wave of profound shock through Balmoral Castle, and, according to some reports, left Queen Camilla shedding tears behind closed doors. The royal court confirmed what insiders are already calling the most agonizing reshuffle since the passing of Queen Elizabeth. Over 20 of Camilla's long-standing royal patronages have been either withdrawn, reallocated, or completely disbanded. What was initially conceived as a plan to modernize the monarchy has turned into a genuine tragedy for a woman who once sincerely believed she had finally secured her rightful place alongside the crown. The statement, quietly and without fanfare released by the Buckingham Palace Communications Department at 9:42 a.m., spoke of a restructuring to ensure the sustainability of royal duties amidst ongoing health challenges. However, what it omitted spoke far louder and more eloquently. Within minutes, leaks began to actively circulate online, suggesting that Camilla's name had been removed from several historic charities, including one she personally founded in the early 2000s. A palace aide described the atmosphere within Balmoral as a frozen silence, as if everyone realized something irreversible and fundamental had occurred. According to the Telegraph's royal correspondent, the decision originated directly from the Privy Council. After weeks of intense debate concerning workload, public perception, and general sentiment, King Charles, still undergoing treatment, reportedly signed the documents with trembling hands. While the official narrative insists this was merely routine administrative work, sources from the Scottish court claim Camilla perceived the news as a personal betrayal. Even for those who have closely followed royal politics for years, the speed and severity of this decision appear unprecedented. This shift is said to have the potential to redefine not only Camilla's position, but the very structure of the modern monarchy as a whole. Crowds have already begun to gather outside Buckingham Palace, demanding immediate answers. Was this merely a strategic adjustment of duties, or the first quiet step toward sending the Queen into early retirement? To fully grasp how this moment transformed into a true royal tragedy, one must revisit the story of how Camilla navigated from scandal to the crown, and why this announcement feels like a chilling echo of history. Balmoral Castle, the very place where this shocking news was announced this morning, holds a sinister symmetry for the Windsors. It was here, over 2 decades ago, that the royal family learned of Princess Diana's tragic death, a wound that never fully healed. And now, another storm has gathered on these same grey Scottish hills. This time, the focus is on the woman once known as the other woman. When Camilla became queen in 2023, it was widely seen as the ultimate and undeniable validation of her immense patience and resilience. She had endured decades of vilification and criticism, proved her worth through tireless charitable work, and earned the deep trust of the late Queen Elizabeth. Few remember, but at one of her last private audiences, Elizabeth personally assured Camilla of her blessing, telling aides that duty redeems all. It was a symbolic passing of the baton, heralding a new era. Yet, symbols are fragile, and the announcement from Balmoral mercilessly shattered this illusion of stability and recognition. As part of a new initiative to enhance royal efficiency, over 200 royal patronages were reviewed earlier this year. The plan aimed to reduce the monarchy's public commitments, something King Charles had envisioned since his time as Prince of Wales. However, behind palace walls, insiders whisper that this was no ordinary streamlining. The list of roles reallocated today disproportionately impacts Camilla's portfolio. Some of her oldest and most significant initiatives have vanished, including literacy campaigns, women's shelters, and the military nursing welfare fund she had supported since 2008. The official explanation presented to the public boils down to a redistribution of duties, motivated by the priorities of the new generation. However, the true sting of the situation lies elsewhere. The very patronages in question have, it seems, been transferred to younger members of the royal family, particularly Prince William and Princess Kate. Kensington Palace sources confirm that Kate will now oversee Camilla's Books for Britain initiative, which has been rebranded as the Royal Reading Forum. Even more symbolically, one of the Queen's most cherished charities, dedicated to horse welfare, was handed to Princess Anne. A close analysis of these moves reveals that this is not merely an administrative decision, but rather a strategic management of succession. One recalls Queen Camilla celebrating her 78th birthday last July. She offered a faint smile at Highgrove as photographers insistently called out her name. In that moment, she appeared proud, serene, and perhaps even relieved that the long struggle for recognition had finally concluded. Yet, beneath that mask of composure, staff noticed palpable fatigue. One footman later admitted that the Queen often worked late into the night, personally reviewing speech drafts and event notes, fearing the slightest misstep. At her advanced age, the constant pressure to appear flawless was truly relentless. Her health, though rarely discussed officially, was a growing concern. There were reports of recurrent chest infections and chronic fatigue, often attributed to seasonal ailments. Nevertheless, royal insiders are now convinced these very ailments precipitated today's decision. Staff in Scotland claim the review of duties was expedited after Camilla missed 2 consecutive Privy Council meetings in August. According to one courtier, such an absence was utterly unacceptable. Public opinion had also undergone significant changes. A new generation of Britons more readily embraces the polished and modern image of William and Kate. They embody renewal and progress, while Camilla, rightly or wrongly, is associated with the monarchy's highly controversial past. Even a royal analyst for The Guardian noted that Camilla's brand, quiet resilience, is no longer sufficient to maintain her relevance in the modern world. And finally, King Charles, caught between the hammer of loyalty and the anvil of legacy. Palace sources describe him as clearly torn by internal conflict, but too vulnerable to challenge the council's recommendation. The thought of seeing his wife's name erased from duties they once shared must have been agony for him. One photograph captured him emerging from Balmoral's library with a hand pressed to his forehead, aides silently trailing him. The tragedy, perhaps, lies not so much in the announcement itself as in what it symbolizes. The monarchy is so desperate to modernize that it's beginning to consume itself. And as the ink dries on these papers, only one question remains. Was this decision truly dictated by concerns for health and efficiency? Or was it a carefully calculated move aimed at quietly excluding Queen Camilla from the future of the crown? Signs of impending trouble, to be perfectly honest, had been flickering for months. Small, almost imperceptible cracks had been appearing on the carefully polished facade of the royal image. The public had only seen Camilla gracefully smiling alongside King Charles during hospital visits and charity receptions. However, those close to her noticed the exhaustion hidden behind her practiced composure. Even before today's announcement, subtle shifts in her schedule hinted that something within the palace machinery was beginning to falter. For instance, in early September, royal reporters noted that Camilla abruptly cancelled a visit to the Mary Rose Museum in Portsmouth, citing logistical changes. However, an aide later confessed it wasn't logistics, but panic. The Queen had received prior notification that a major review of patronages was nearing completion, and rumors suggested her own name was on the chopping block. This news reportedly plunged her into deep personal distress. Not again, not after all these years, one longtime staffer recalled. The sense of déjà vu is striking. It echoes 1995, when another royal wife, Princess Diana, found herself marginalized by the very institution she sought to uphold. Now, history, it seems, is repeating itself. Only this time, the woman who replaced her is under fire. Even in the highest palace circles, tension was mounting. According to a source close to Clarence House, Camilla's private secretary faced pushback from senior courtiers over the cancellation of several planned engagements. A memorandum, reportedly leaked to the Times, detailed her increasing fatigue and significant difficulties in maintaining her previous public pace. While the document's initial purpose was to justify a lighter workload for her, once the information hit the tabloids, it immediately sparked a wave of speculation that the Queen might no longer be capable of fully performing her representative duties. Meanwhile, members of the press began scrutinizing financial reports from the sovereign grant. Their attention was drawn to a curious circumstance. Royal household expenditures had increased by nearly 13% in the last fiscal year, despite the Queen attending significantly fewer engagements herself. This stark discrepancy immediately triggered a wave of backlash online, where critics accused her of enjoying privileges while shirking duties. From the outside, the situation looked extremely unfavorable. In the opinion of one prominent royal historian, it created the impression of a queen who had given in to the pressure of circumstances. Not everyone, however, wholeheartedly bought into this giving up narrative. A number of sympathetic commentators rightly pointed to the truly impossible position Camilla found herself in, forced to juggle the numerous duties of queen, consort, and caregiver, while Charles battled a severe illness, cancer. Imagine the difficulty of balancing the expectations of an entire nation with personal fear, one columnist wrote, trying to explain the situation. Every absence becomes a screaming headline, and every public appearance is meticulously scrutinized for signs of weakness. Nevertheless, the wave of negative reaction continued to build with alarming force. Social media users actively created and spread hashtags like Camilla Collapse and Queen in Crisis. Even popular late-night show hosts began making jokes, hinting that Britain now had a part-time queen. The tone of these remarks was quite harsh, but it resonated strongly with a younger audience that increasingly favored the image of strength and family unity projected by William and Kate. For royal observers worldwide, this escalating tension raised a deeper and more fundamental question. Is the monarchy evolving, or is it simply devouring itself in a desperate attempt to survive? Back at the palace, tension reached its apex, a critical point. Camilla's aides described an atmosphere of fear. Corridors enveloped in ringing silence, staff moving on tiptoes as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace. Persistent rumors circulated that William and Kate had been quietly asked to take on a significant portion of her public roles, especially representing the crown at state charitable events. This rumor gained particular traction after Kate unexpectedly appeared at a literacy gala in Manchester, an event traditionally associated with Camilla's portfolio. The crowd welcomed her arrival with enthusiasm, completely unaware of the deep political undertones of the event. By mid-October, even the most senior courtiers openly admitted that the situation had become simply untenable. Camilla reportedly broke down in tears during a planning meeting held at Clarence House, completely overwhelmed by the immense pressure. Nevertheless, the royal PR machine stubbornly continued to project an image of normalcy and stability. In official press photos, she smiled at a garden event the next day, dressed in a soft blue dress and pearls, composed, elegant, seemingly impervious to external turmoil. But attentive observers noticed her hands trembling as she waved to the crowd. From the outside, it looked like a woman diligently and gracefully performing her duty. Internally, however, it looked like a queen slowly but steadily losing control over her own kingdom. The first signs of the impending changes were no longer mere whispers. They were overt warnings, clearly written for all to see. And when the official announcement finally came, few in the palace could genuinely say they were truly surprised. Nevertheless, one fundamental question remained unanswered. If these adjustments were truly solely administrative, why did they feel so personal, so cruel? And what unseen force within the monarchy decided it was time to redraw the map of royal power when the royal court's communications team released its faceless and succinct statement that morning? The truth had been brewing for weeks in the quiet, almost silent corridors of Balmoral and Buckingham Palace. What remained hidden from the public eye was a subtle but continuous series of meetings, anxious whispers behind closed doors, and an invisible paper trail that ultimately led to the very announcement that is now shaking the monarchy to its core. It all began in mid-August, during what was supposed to be a private family retreat in Scotland. Charles, still undergoing treatment and visibly weakened, summoned his senior advisors for what insiders now call the Autumn Reformation. The meeting, held in an ancient library overlooking the picturesque River Dee, included the Lord Chamberlain, 2 Privy Council secretaries, and, quite unexpectedly, Princess Anne. The main topic of discussion was a large-scale restructuring of royal duties and the redefinition of patronage allocation. Notably, Camilla was not invited to this initial, crucial meeting. The first meeting. According to a source with close ties to the Privy Council, 3 potential courses of action were presented to the monarch. The first path involved maintaining the existing system, which carried the risk of escalating public discontent due to high financial costs. The second option proposed delegating more responsibilities to junior members of the royal family. Finally, the third path entailed relinquishing certain commitments and subsequently reallocating patronages, intended to ensure generational continuity in the long term. Reportedly, Charles chose the third option. This decision, it was asserted, was driven by rational rather than emotional considerations. However, Princess Anne, known for her pragmatism, openly questioned, "What happens when the cuts affect someone who isn't very popular to begin with?" The silence that followed eloquently answered her question. No words needed. As soon as news of the planned cutbacks reached Camilla's private secretary, panic erupted instantly. She immediately requested an urgent audience with Charles, but the monarch postponed the meeting twice, citing ongoing treatment. The Queen felt cornered, finding herself in a hopeless situation. One of her aides later shared his thoughts with The Guardian. It wasn't just about losing the charities she oversaw. It was about losing the respect she had fought so hard, for decades, to earn. Behind the scenes of palace life, the political atmosphere noticeably chilled, becoming almost glacial. The team of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, William and Kate, working at Kensington Palace, received an unspoken directive to begin preparing new schedules for early 2026. These schedules were to include several initiatives that had previously been under Camilla's patronage. Staff members of the royal couple described this transfer of duties as routine. However, one aide later candidly admitted, "We all knew this was far from routine. It was a kind of dress rehearsal for succession, unfolding in real time." Meanwhile, the Queen's inner circle began to rapidly disintegrate. Her longtime and loyal dresser, Angela Holliday, reportedly resigned after a very tense confrontation related to event organization. A small group of loyal staff made desperate attempts to shield Camilla from increasing pressure, even leaking favorable stories to the press to counteract the damage to her reputation. One such leak, claiming Camilla personally funded the renovation of a children's reading center, was quickly debunked by journalists. Public reaction was immediate, and only reinforced the image of a queen detached from financial realities. By early October, the atmosphere at Balmoral had become unbearably suffocating. Staff, in their conversations, dubbed this period the season of silence. Charles spent most of his days secluded in his private study, working on state papers almost entirely alone. Camilla, when she did appear, was described as polite, but also very fragile, greeting footmen with barely perceptible faint smiles before disappearing back into her drawing room. Princess Anne often paid visits, partly to support the king, and partly, some claimed, to ensure maximum transparency in the ongoing review of royal duties. One aide recalled overhearing Anne's voice one night, sharp and unmistakable. "We must not repeat the mistakes of the 90s. No more secrets," she declared, yet secrets had already begun to emerge. A confidential memo from the Lord Chamberlain's office, later obtained by the Sunday Times, confirmed discrepancies between the number of official patronages listed on the royal website and those recorded in internal registries. Several missing entries, including the Queen's Reading Room charity, were placed under review pending redistribution. When this news reached Camilla, she reportedly broke down in tears and locked herself in her chambers for several hours, deeply distressed. Nevertheless, she was determined to fight, albeit quietly. That same week, she arranged a private meeting at Clarence House with several high-ranking courtiers, including Sir Clive Alderton, Charles's private secretary. Witnesses to this meeting claim she pleaded with them not to link her health to the performance of her royal duties. "I can rest when duty permits," she told them. "But if I am erased from what I have built for years, what then remains of me as queen?" Her words, according to one attendee, left everyone in the room in stunned silence. Even Charles was torn by contradictions, finding himself in a difficult position. Those who saw him that month described a man aging visibly each day, caught between his love for his wife and his duty to the legacy. One courtier later told reporters, "The king's heart was with his wife, but his crown was with the institution, and the institution always prevails." He signed the final authorization documents on a cold early November morning. That fateful night, the lights of Balmoral burned unusually late, and whispers spread among the palace staff that Camilla herself, quite uncharacteristically for someone of her high rank, had personally packed several travel bags. Beyond the majestic castle walls, Information leaks only intensified, seeping into the media space. A high-ranking official, wishing to remain anonymous, told the Times that Queen Camilla's role is evolving towards a supportive, rather than an executive position. This statement, translated into layman's terms, meant she was effectively being sidelined. British tabloids, like predators, seized on this phrase, publishing sensational headlines such as "Queen without a crown" and "Camilla's farewell," thus asserting a particular narrative in the public consciousness. Despite this media storm, Kate remained unshakable, carefully avoiding any hint of triumph. Nevertheless, when she appeared at a literacy gala in Leeds, an event that, ironically, had previously been under Camilla's patronage, her presence unequivocally signaled the changes to come. The applause that greeted her filled the hall like a harbinger of a new era, echoing off the walls. There's no denying that observing these royal transitions sends a chill down one's spine. For all their gilded titles and majestic regalia, these are human lives, intricately intertwined with an institution that demands colossal sacrifices, not sentimental displays. Every smile, every spoken word, every cancelled public appearance instantly becomes ammunition in the relentless court of public opinion, where every move is scrutinized. By late October, insiders reported that a final and irreversible decision had been made. The official announcement would be public, dignified, and undoubtedly devastating for Camilla. Queen Camilla's office would be significantly streamlined, and her duties reduced solely to state representation. She reportedly addressed her staff saying, "I was never meant to stay forever, was I?" And so, when the royal website was quietly updated that morning, erasing her name from several pages, the true tragedy wasn't in the act of deletion itself. It lay in its absolute inevitability. Yet, as the monarchy braced for the inevitable fallout, one enigma remained shrouded in mystery. Why did an internal memo indicate external influence as a contributing factor to this fateful decision? Who or what truly prompted this royal reset, operating from the shadows? Within hours of the shocking announcement from Balmoral, British media transformed into a battlefield. Headlines screamed of betrayal, fierce power struggles, and Queen Camilla's possible quiet retirement. On every major television network, analysts relentlessly replayed the same footage: a motorcade of royal cars exiting the massive castle gates, and the barely discernible reflection of a female silhouette visible through a tinted window. This elusive shadow, they claimed, belonged to Camilla. And in just one evening, this image became the defining symbol of the unfolding crisis: a queen retreating from her own throne. By the next morning, public outrage spilled onto the city streets. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace, holding cardboard signs that read, "Not my queen," and "Return the duty, not the drama." Crowds chanted their slogans in the drizzling rain, expressing a deep frustration that had been building for months. It was discontent over the cost of royal renovations, the taxpayer bill for healthcare, and the relentless feeling that something within the monarchy itself had gone catastrophically wrong. It was no longer just about Camilla. She had become a lightning rod for everything the public resented about privilege and unchecked power. Social media only amplified the growing chaos. Hashtags like Camilla Crisis, Crown Reset, and Queen Out began trending globally, spreading like wildfire. Within hours, TikTok videos emerged comparing Camilla's downfall to Marie Antoinette's tragic final days at Versailles. Other users juxtaposed clips of Princess Kate's calm and confident appearances with Camilla's weary expressions, captioning them, "Past versus future." For many watching from abroad, from Toronto to Manila to Melbourne, this was the most captivating royal drama since Princess Diana's funeral, commanding universal attention. And amidst this maelstrom of events stood King Charles, torn between fury and profound heartbreak. The Times reported that he privately implored his aides to soften the narrative, insisting his wife still held a vital role for the crown's future. However, his words proved powerless against the surging tide of public opinion. Rumors began to circulate that the king had offered to temporarily hand over some ceremonial duties to Prince William to ease the pressure on the queen. To the tabloids, This sounded like nothing less than abdication, in all but name. An air of tense anticipation hung heavy as the royal press secretary, standing in the drizzling rain outside Clarence House, addressed the microphones. His voice, barely trembling, delivered a pre-prepared statement. Her Majesty the Queen remains fully committed to her duties. Adjustments to her schedule are part of an ongoing modernization process. These dry and impersonal formulations instantly sowed seeds of distrust in the public consciousness. Meanwhile, behind the majestic palace walls, staff described an atmosphere bordering on controlled panic. Aides worked 12-hour shifts, struggling to cope with hundreds of media inquiries. One insider revealed that Camilla had requested all televisions be turned off in her private quarters. She couldn't bear to see herself on screen, the source disclosed, emphasizing her profound discomfort. Every new headline mercilessly branded her a ghost queen, intensifying public condemnation. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American late-night shows dissected the situation with unconcealed glee. One comedian quipped sardonically, "The British monarchy must have lost their Wi-Fi again because they just deleted their queen." Even serious and authoritative outlets like CNN viewed the unfolding crisis as a harbinger of a generational shift. Analysts speculated that the announcement had been deliberately orchestrated to clear the path for William and Kate to assume a more prominent position in the hierarchy. Public sympathy noticeably leaned towards the younger royal couple. William, looking rather somber during his visit to a London hospital, uttered just one phrase in response to a reporter's question. "Family always comes first." It was a carefully chosen phrase, neutral in form, but with a deep, multi-layered subtext. Kate, by contrast, radiated at a youth center event that same day. Her composure and resilience under pressure were compared to the legendary self-possession of the late Queen Elizabeth. "You could feel the torch being passed," remarked one BBC commentator. And this was no subtle hint, yet the most furious reactions came not from the general public, but from deep within the palace. According to The Guardian, Princess Anne confronted senior courtiers at an emergency meeting, demanding an account of the review's timeline and progress. "You humiliated her," she reportedly declared, slamming a folder onto the table. "You humiliated the king." Her words underscored what many had long suspected. This was not merely a bureaucratic procedure, but a quiet yet decisive political coup. Outside, meanwhile, the protest movement gained momentum. Crowds sang the national anthem with altered lyrics, replacing the traditional "God Save the Queen" with "God Save the Truth." It was a raw, emotional outpouring of discontent, unlike anything the monarchy had seen since Diana's tragic death. For the first time in many years, the King's Guard was forced to close the gates to hold back the surging crowd. And throughout it all, Camilla remained completely invisible. Her absence only fueled new waves of speculation. Some claimed she had fled to Raymill House. Others insisted she was in a private clinic. Each theory gained rapid traction online, feeding a digital frenzy that even the most seasoned palace press office couldn't contain. It was astonishing how quickly a dynasty, thriving for centuries on ritual and tradition, could unravel when public sentiment turned against it. What began as a modest organizational review had morphed into a public trial, exposing the fragility hidden beneath apparent grandeur. By the end of that tumultuous week, one question gripped the entire nation. Would the Queen ever return to public life? Or had she already quietly exited history? By the time the weekend arrived, the monarchy had shifted into survival mode. The royal court's crisis team, an elite circle of advisors known internally as the firm's firewall, met twice daily, diligently drafting statements and rehearsing damage control measures. Yet, despite all their efforts, the narrative of events had already spiraled out of their control. For the first time, British morning papers were unified in their headlines. Camilla's crown crumbles. Beyond the palace gates, aides spoke in whispers, as if afraid of being overheard. One insider described the prevailing mood as mournful, except no one could quite pinpoint what exactly had been lost: reputation, power, or the illusion that everything was fine. King Charles spent most of his days at Sandringham, shielding himself from omnipresent cameras, while his doctors adjusted his treatment schedule. Reports emerged that he had suffered a brief bout of ill health after a stressful meeting with senior officials, sparking new speculation about his potential imminent removal from active duties. For a monarch who had waited his entire life for the throne, time proved to be a ruthless test. And then, the results of public opinion polls took center stage. In just 72 hours, public support for Camilla plummeted to 23%, the worst showing for any royal family member since the distant 1990s. Meanwhile, William and Kate's ratings, by contrast, soared, their popularity nearing an impressive 80%. A poll conducted by the reputable YouGov clearly demonstrated whom Britons viewed as the future pillars of the monarchy. Almost 2/3 of respondents favored the Prince and Princess of Wales. "The people have already crowned them," one analyst unequivocally stated on Sky News, adding, "I can't help but think how quickly public affection turns into impatience." The same nation that had recently shown sympathy for Camilla's quiet endurance now saw in her only a symbol of weariness and fragility. This was undoubtedly unfair, but the monarchy was never built on principles of fairness. Its essence lies in image, and that image had undergone a radical transformation. On the international stage, the tremors were felt no less acutely. In Australia and New Zealand, Republican movements wasted no time capitalizing on the moment, asserting that the chaos in London was irrefutable proof of the entire system's irrelevance. Canadian commentators publicly questioned whether taxpayers should continue funding expensive royal tours when the monarchy couldn't even put its own house in order. Even in Caribbean nations, local newspapers actively speculated that the Camilla scandal could significantly accelerate moves towards full independence. Within the UK itself, palace staff feverishly sought to demonstrate stability. Kate, with her characteristic quiet efficiency, began to take on more and more duties: school visits, early childhood development initiatives, and numerous charitable events. Her delicate presence proved to be exactly what the institution needed: stable, graceful, and utterly uncontroversial. The contrast with Camilla's strained absence could not have been starker. Tabloids soon dubbed her the nation's calm. Meanwhile, Princess Anne, always the family's steel spine, reportedly paid a visit to Camilla at Raymill House. Though details of this meeting remain highly confidential, one aide claimed Anne's message was both compassionate and sharp. "You must rest, but don't let them erase you." The Queen reportedly replied, "Perhaps it's already too late." King Charles, torn between protecting his wife and safeguarding the crown, authorized a final compromise. Camilla's public schedule was significantly reduced to lighter duties, while William and Kate assumed leadership of several major patronages. Officially, this was attributed to matters of health and efficiency. Unofficially, it was an unambiguous transfer of power. Even the Church of England weighed in. During a sermon delivered in the majestic St. Paul's Cathedral, the Archbishop offered a subtle piece of advice: "The steadfastness of service is not in never stumbling, but in returning with humility." Commentators interpreted these words as a gentle suggestion for the Queen to gracefully step aside. For the broader public, fatigue gradually gave way to acceptance. The drama that had dominated headlines for weeks slowly subsided, transforming into a melancholic curiosity. People began to ask not if Camilla would return, but when the transition of power to William and Kate might become official. And perhaps this is the cruelest part of royal life. One can dedicate their entire existence to serving the crown, yet a single headline, an illness, a whisper of generational change can erase them from the entire narrative. Nevertheless, for those who have followed the Windsor's fortunes long enough, one constant truth remains: no scandal ever truly dies. There is always another chapter waiting to be written, and this time, it would come from within the very walls of the palace. For what no one outside the monarchy yet knew was that the last letter, signed, sealed, and carefully hidden in the king's personal archive, contained the most heartbreaking revelation of all. When the storm finally subsided, the monarchy remained standing, yet irrevocably changed. In the quiet halls of Windsor, aides whispered about a single envelope, sealed in the king's handwriting, bearing the simple inscription, "For the heir's eyes only." Some speculated it contained Charles's private reflections on his reign. Others whispered it held instructions for what should happen if his health were to decline again. No one outside the family knows its contents. But one thing is certain. Whatever lies within will shape the next royal chapter. Camilla, now largely out of the public eye, divides her time between Raymill House and Windsor. Those close to her say she has accepted her diminished role with a weary grace. She understands the tides of history, one aide quietly remarked. They lift and they sink, but they always move forward. There is something undeniably human in this truth. Power, fame, and titles, all that seems permanent, are in reality merely borrowed. Whether in a monarchy or in ordinary life, the lesson is the same. If you don't adapt, the world will adapt for you. Camilla's story, when viewed in its authentic essence, transcends common notions of privilege or social scandals. It is a narrative of unyielding resilience of spirit, illustrating how even the most influential figures can find themselves compelled to bow before the relentless march of time, unpredictable circumstances, and, of course, the stern judgment of the public. Perhaps it is in this universal human drama that the inexplicable allure the Windsor dynasty has continued to exert on us for decades truly lies. Their destinies, full of triumphs and setbacks, invariably capture attention, prompting reflection on the nature of power and vulnerability. Behind the facade of royal crowns and majestic carriages, beyond the polish of ceremonial protocols, the members of this family appear before us as remarkable mirrors, reflecting our own shared human fragility. In their lives, we observe how once strong family ties sometimes unravel under the pressure of trials, how carefully constructed reputations can swiftly shift under the influence of public opinion, and how unyielding pride inevitably gives way to profound vulnerability. And it is precisely in this poignant reflection that we are subtly reminded of an eternal truth. True grace lies not in stubbornly clinging to power or high position, but in wisely understanding when the moment arrives to let them go with dignity.